Get notifications and stay updated every time I post a challenge podcast by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you all and hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Mike Lewis podcast. This is episode number 72. And if you're looking on your screen right now, folks, I got a guest who hasn't been in the fold since Rivals, but we're bringing him back here to kind of pick his brain, Mr. Adam King. What's going on, man?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here. Really excited.
I'm just glad we're off on a good foot. I know that you're a Steeler fan, if I'm gonna bring up some past times, I mean, I got some gripes with you guys a little bit over past Super Bowl that we played each other in, but you know, it's what it is.
Yeah, I remember watching. I remember the end around pass from Antoine Randall to Hines Ward. That's the one, and the no call pass interference in the end zone that my friends were screaming about. So yeah.
I don't know. You have to be willing to give a little, I feel like, though, in terms of the officiating of that game, no?
Well, it's a Super Bowl, right? If you can't let them play in the Super Bowl, the last thing you want to, you know, I feel like in the regular season, there are plays that you kind of get the feel for, and so you kind of know what the officials are going to let you play, and then every season is defined by that. And, you know, the worst thing that can happen for an official is for them to call your number or to be recognized in any way. Like, if you're doing your job as an official, they should not know who you are. So I think the no call is a safe call, because if you throw a flag and it's a phantom call, you're never going to live that down. So
yeah, I want to ask you though quickly, since we're on the topic of the Steelers, what was your feelings on Juju Smith-Schuster and Claypool with the whole kind of TikTok movement towards the end of last season? Was that something that bothered you as a fan to see that kind of pick up steam and serve as a distraction, or do you not see it as that big of a deal?
Big time distraction, in my opinion. Now, granted, again, I'm just coming at it as a fan, and I have my own relationship with social media and with media in general. But when I was watching it, I was cringing because I thought, you know, I get it that this is where they are now, and you know, Juju's only 22, I think, or 23 years old, and the guys around him, a lot of them are similar in age, so they express themselves through TikTok and social media, and that's kind of how they emote. So I understand why the desire is there, but from a consumption perspective, it detracts from what you're trying to do, and it creates fodder for the other team to play against you. Football is an emotional game, right? You're not playing every day like baseball. It's not a marathon. You're playing once a week for a 60-minute game, which only takes about 2.5 hours, and it's like blitzkrieg, right? It's everything you've got for those 2.5 to 3 hours. And when you give another team an emotional lift by doing things like that, I think it does affect the game, and I think it does detract from what you're trying to do. If you can humble yourself and play the game from within, you'll be a better team as a whole. And so I don't think Juju's a bad guy. I don't think he did it to intentionally distract the team. I think he was doing it from a place of, I want to build my brand. Football, you know, and then good for them that they're thinking proactively about what their brand is like, how to spend their money, what they should do after football's over, etc. But in that moment, when it was happening, I felt like it was detracting from the game. It was disrespectful to the other team. Dancing on the other team's logo, no matter how you look at it, is going to be viewed as disrespect. Hell, if they were dancing on the Steelers logo, we would feel disrespected. So I don't think it came from a bad place, but I think the act itself did detract from the game, and I think it did have an effect on their play.
For me, at least, like my stance on it is kind of like the cardinal sin that I feel like or most coaches explain to their players is it's the term called bulletin board material. It's kind of like if someone does something, you kind of like hang it up on a board, maybe not literally, or maybe sometimes literally, who knows, depending on your coaching. And then that's kind of serves as like your motivation and kind of like that like psychological edge to kind of like go out there and use that. But for me, I think like, yeah, you just kind of got to stay away from like dancing on teams' logos, because you don't want to give any opponent the psychological kind of like drive. You want to like keep the playing field like neutral, you know. You don't want to just like go out there and beat, you don't, the term like kind of like silent assassin, right? Like you don't want to talk before you actually go out there and play. You just kind of want to do like what you're out there planning on doing, which is obviously going out and playing the game. But for me, after he when it really started picking up buzz first after the Bills game, what kind of annoyed me was that he said, "Oh, I'm gonna keep dancing," because they were playing the Bengals next, who was like 3-10-1 at the time. So it's kind of like, man, that's a little weak, man. Like you're playing
Yeah.
the Bengals, and then it still came back to like kind of like rear its ugly head a little bit. So I feel like if he was hypothetically playing like, I don't know, Kansas City next, and he made that statement about like, "Oh, I'm gonna keep dancing," then maybe, I mean, I still wouldn't suggest doing it, but it would have held a little more weight, you know?
Well, people have to remember, I mean, they lost like 6 out of the last 7 games or something crazy. I mean, they started 11-0, right? So it's kind of the tale of two seasons. He's dancing throughout the backstretch of that season. The Steelers were terrible. They weren't even just average; they were terrible. I mean, they got smoked in the playoff game to the Browns. It was embarrassing, and so to not kind of change things toward the end, you can't rest on your laurels when you haven't won a decent game in over a month and a half, right? I think so. That also bothered me as well. It's like, oh, I'm going to keep dancing, or I'm going to keep doing this behavior that we think is well, it's not working. It hasn't worked, and all of the hype surrounding your 11-0 start was all but obliterated by the time you got to the 16th and 17th week of the season. So it rubbed me the wrong way. I love Juju as a player. I hope he keeps that young energy, that feistiness, but I think that behavior in and of itself was misplaced.
Now we can kind of dance off that now and go now into what I would always ask my guests in the beginning of this is kind of like what this kind of crazy past year and adjustment period's been like for them. What's this kind of, I would say 2020, but it's basically now like just I'm just gonna preface and say that just the pandemic. What has it kind of been like for you?
Yeah, it's obviously different for everybody. My situation was, for those who don't know, like or know me outside of the challenge, or know me only inside of the challenge. I grew up in entertainment. When I left school, I came back. I raised in LA, went to college, came back, worked in LA my whole life, pretty much. Traveled a lot, but LA has always been my home base, and so I was always go, 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 go. In the 7 years leading up to 2020, or the pandemic, I should just say, I worked for an entertainment marketing firm, and I was Sean Combs' personal assistant, P. Diddy. And in that world, I was working crazy hours. Anyway, 7 hours a day, oftentimes, 90 to 100 hours a week. So there was no break, right? So I'm sitting there when all this is popping off. I had resigned. I had taken a different job in Santa Monica because I wanted to work on my own personal projects. And so when the pandemic hit for me, it was really a way to just kind of slow down. I looked at it I looked at it as a way, or as the universe's way of telling me, hey, you've been going too fast. Everybody's been going too fast, right? You have your phone on you 24/7. You're checking everything all the time. People are texting you at 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. We're all on social media all the time. It's just, and people are stressed out. And we've lost sense and sight of what really makes us happy. So I saw it as a sign to slow down. And it was really, really healthy for me in the long run, very unhealthy in the short run. So in the short run, it was me kind of closing off. There were a lot of emotional breakdowns. There was kind of confusion on my end about what my next steps would be. I've always had these projects on the back burner that I've never really initiated because I was too busy working for somebody else. I was too busy trying to get projects for Spotify, for Samsung, and for this marketing firm off the ground, and all these other jobs I've had. And I never took any time for me. So 2020, I really just took a huge step back and said, okay, what do you really want? Like, life is what happens while you're making other plans, right? So what do you really want to do? And out of that came this new sense of who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish in life. And so I've got those projects going now. So now I've got a bunch of irons in the fire. I've got, I've never been a huge social media guy, so I'm trying to branch out more of that. I'm on my Instagram is Kingro at Kingromac, Kingromac. So I'm going to start announcing my projects on my Instagram as well as my Twitter, which is AdamKingMTV. And those are going to start in the next couple of weeks. Now, as I move forward through 2021, obviously there's going to be a sense of normalcy that has to come back into place, right? Some kind of normalcy. Whether there's a new normal or revert to the old stuff, we'll be seeing. But for me, it's going to be very, very positive in the sense that all of the old things that I was putting on the back burner that I didn't want to do because I was like, well, I'll get to those eventually. There is no more eventually. It's like, let's do these now. It's like shit or get off the pot. I feel like, my 20s, especially when I was doing challenges, right? Because I worked for CAA for a couple of years, then do a challenge. Then I would work for a casting director or work on movies or work on television shows like Undercover Boss and the Travel Channel for Lifetime, and then go do a challenge. So I was bouncing around a lot. And in that framework, there really wasn't any time for me because I was either on a show or doing appearances or then working again for 60 or 70 hours a week for somebody else and working weekends, etc. So finally taking the time to step back and do what I always wanted to do, which is kind of create my own content and write and also be a part of other people's projects in a production capacity, in a producing capacity. So I'm really excited about it. I'm having a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to what the future holds, and obviously there's going to be a lot of monkey wrenches thrown into the works and curveballs thrown in my direction, but I'm excited for it. It's scary because anytime you let go of what you're used to, there's a lot of people changing careers right now, not just because of the pandemic. I think the way we structure our lives. There are a lot of people that will have one career in their 20s and or 30s and then transition out later. Things happen so quickly right now. You just look at the music industry. My father, I remember when Spotify was coming around and I was like, look, this is going to be huge. You just have to accept it. People are no longer going to buy albums in stores. It's going to be a thing. And, it rocked the music industry for about 18 months, 2 years or whatever until they adjusted and realized, okay, the money is there. People will pay for music. We just have to change the way we address it. And it's painful, but every industry is going to have to go through it. And so you just got to be there and embrace it and do the best you can with it. And that's what I'm about to do.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, I think you mentioned about going on challenges, in the midst of that. Was that kind of hard to manage, schedule-wise, with what you were doing and then having to go obviously compete on challenges? How did you manage around that?
Yeah, it's difficult. If anybody's out there that wants to do it, I would say the best way to do it is to, it exists now, like the gig economy and have your own side job because you have to leave for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. Now, the structure is different moving forward. There's one out right now, the challenge. They're filming it a little differently, but ultimately you have to take a huge chunk out of your year to do it, and regular, quote unquote, regular jobs won't allow you the time or just mental space to do that. So you really have to have a flexible situation professionally to do it. And I was lucky in that, when you're working on a TV show or a production of any sort, you usually film for 6 months or 8 months or a year or whatever it is, and then you have a break, and then you hop on another show. So early on, that's what happened. My first job was with Fox, and then I ended up becoming an associate producer on a TV show, and the TV show ended, and right then is when they called me for Real World. So I was able to just drop everything and go to Paris for 5 months to film The Real World, and then that turned into a whole whirlwind. But after about 2 years of that, I had to take a step back and okay, let's get back to work doing something productive. Because I was, that life, you're doing appearances. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your people on your show have told you that we go and drink for a living, right? We show up at a bar, and it was very empty for me because you don't really have any talent per se, which is fine. There's a whole generation of people who have no talent, right? They're great business people. I would never knock the Kardashians or any of those people for what they've done. I mean, those people grew up in the same world. I grew up in Beverly Hills. They grew up in the same world I did, and I think they're brilliant business people. But they don't write, they don't direct, they don't produce, they don't sing, they don't dance. None of that. None of what we would typically consider talent. There's a new type of talent, and it's basically just branding. So to me, it felt kind of weird just to be in a place where they're paying you just to be there, and after a while, it gets to you, right? You're drinking every night in bars, and your job is just to kind of be this crazy person in a wild and young setting. I remember when I was doing spring break. I turned 30, and I was doing spring break. I was looking around. I was like, this isn't right. at a certain point, you've got to really check yourself and say, okay. And look, I have people on both sides of it. Some were saying, yeah, you're right. Maybe you should go back and you should, you've written some great ththings. Like, why don't you go back into helping produce TV, et cetera, or working legitimately in some capacity. And other people were like, hell, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. So just do it as long as you can. So I had people in both ears saying that stuff, and I just had to follow my heart and say, okay, look, I have to do something that I feel proud of, that I feel content with doing. And you can only drink in bars for so long before you start to feel like a complete waste of space. And so, I stepped away from it for a while, and I've always felt like I timed everything appropriately. I miss it. I still think it's a great experience. It's kind of like summer camp, going on the challenges.
Yeah.
I would never knock them. There's so much fun to be there, to be the guy. I mean, I'm lucky I got to do them. And it's sad not to do them. And there is a bit of jealousy when you watch them and other people are doing them. But there is also a lot of tension and a lot of angst that exists when you're filming them, that doesn't really resonate when you're sitting in a comfortable setting on your couch watching it. When you're just watching it, you can like judge accordingly and make fun of people and pick apart the characters and the story. It's not the same as being there with the cameras on you. And one of the things I always got kind of frustrated with was when people would say that, oh, I forget the cameras are there. Because I call bullshit on that. Like, the cameras are in your face all the time. And they've changed the way they film it now, because years ago when we started, they would film it and there was what was called the fourth wall. So anyone in production knows that the fourth wall is the camera, and you're not allowed to look at the camera or talk to the camera. You have to pretend in the sense that they're not there, and it's called the fourth wall. Well, now they shoot it very differently. Now there's kind of a relationship with the camera where people are allowed to look at the camera, and you'll see it a lot. It kind of was brought in my opinion, in real TV, what I call real TV, like The Office, right? If you watch The Office, you'll see Jim or Pam or any of the other characters will look at the camera and give the camera a look or like play to the camera. And so I think that kind of normalized it for the audience to accept the fact that the cameras were actually a person, not just kind of a fly on the wall. And as a result, it kind of bled through and permeated through TV culture. And now it exists on the challenges and in that space, which I think is fine. I think it's great.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely think. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with like current challenges and whatnot, but I definitely feel like in this newer day and age of the challenge that we're currently living in, it seems like a lot of the times some of these newer cats are kind of doing stuff for the camera because they know it's there, more so than letting things organically play out. And I think that that's been under the microscope a little bit from some of the fans in terms of scrutiny.
Yeah, well, it's been going on for a long time. So it's probably more obvious now as people become more familiar with the show and how it's shot, and people are more exposed to cameras themselves. Like, everybody's filming themselves now, right? So you see how someone's facial expressions can change and why they would do things in certain situations. So people aren't as naive to the process as they used to be. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But I mean, that's been going on for years. It was one of the things that a lot of the cast members would talk about when the cameras weren't around, or when other people would do it, we would call them out. Now, the cameras can't show that, but we would be sitting somewhere, we'd have a conversation, and you're saying, like, we're talking about, the price of tea in China or whatever. Like, okay, hey, the blah, 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 XYZ, XYZ, and then someone else, the cameras will come around, and someone else will pop in and go like, hey, don't you think so-and-so's a bitch? And you're like, whoa, hold up. We were just talking about, some other subject completely unrelated. Why are you throwing this in here? And it's obvious that the cameras were around and you wanted them to get that footage of you making this comment or whatever. You wanted to get that footage. And the weird thing about that is you can't control that. If you're the kind of cast member that wants to control the narrative, you're going to be sorely disappointed and frustrated with the process. You're going to be very upset with what happens, with what's shown, because in your mind, we're all the hero of our own story. All right? So in your mind, it's going down a certain way. Well, your perspective is not shared by the other 20 people in the house, or the cameras, or the story producers, or anybody else. And that's a very rough thing for cast members to have to experience. And it usually happens on their first show. Now, I think nowadays they don't even bring in real world kids anymore. They bring in people from all these other shows, so everyone's had their own experience. But it's a very real thing. It's a very real effect, and I've seen cast members change from the first show they do, second and third and fourth, where they realize, oh, I can't control this anymore. So whereas in the first one they're at, and there are still ones out there that know that if they scream and yell, they're going to get camera time and they're going to get invited back. So they'll be like, "Wah!" or try to like fake create a rival, so they can get around. They'll have one. I mean, I still think, like, me and CT, like, that was like legit, straight up. That was a hardcore process because, I mean, we were the original people that couldn't be in a room together. After what was it, Duel 2, I mean, the reunion show, they had to bring in extra security for the reunion show because they were scared we were going to have round 2, like, backstage and stuff. So, luckily those things have been smoothed over, but I think the authenticity of the early shows, the ones that I was on, at least moving forward through the later ones, was what drove it. But it was also what created so much angst around it, why it affected us personally, and really kind of got to us. I mean, I've had many nights I've lost sleep over things that I've done, things that I've said on camera that I wish hadn't happened. I mean, look, that fight, I'm not proud of it. Look, I am the person I am because of the things that I've done, right? We're all a product of our experiences. But, I'm not proud of that moment. I'm definitely not excited that it was captured on television. But, you live and learn.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get to that later. But something I wanted to knock out quick, since you mentioned about them pulling from other shows, was just to put into perspective, this past season, or the one that's just currently airing now, they actually pulled from a singer from America's Got Talent and a WWE wrestler, just to put things into perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Right? When I was working for Puff, I ran into Sean Merriman. Sean Merriman used to come to parties and stuff, and like he was around.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize he was on it, so he started talking to me. He was like, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah," and he was like mentioning his challenge. I was like, "Wait, they put you on a challenge?" He was like, "Oh yeah, me and CT. I know CT from the challenge, etc." And I thought to myself, that's where we've gotten. Like, they're pulling NFL players, not just NFL players, but Pro Bowl NFL players.
Yeah.
And putting them on challenges. Like, wow, because like when it started, it was just fun and game. If you watch the games, it was like everybody into a pit, and you're all slimy, and it was kind of fun. My first one was Battle of the Sexes 2, where you're not going to have feats of strength with men against women. It just wouldn't be fair, obviously, because of the discrepancy in strength. But we would do the games that were fun, melting a big block of ice, target practice things that were just like carnival games almost that I thought were fun. And as I did more and more challenges, the challenges themselves graduated to like basically gladiator games.
Yeah.
When Brad and Landon got back from the Duel 2, they were both pretty jacked up. Shoulder, I think Brad's shoulder was done. I think Landon ended up having to have surgery at some point. There have been a number of injuries that have occurred from these challenges. I mean, people go hard, and you don't realize it when you're watching it because they only have an hour to show it. Some of these elimination rounds and challenges go for hours. I remember on Gauntlet 3, Frank and MJ were in the sand for what must have been at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Like dragging this, they were bloodied. Their elbows and knees were all bloody from trying to grind the sand out. I mean, we were out there. It was a long time, and they were a complete muscle failure by the end. So obviously, they don't have enough time to show that. They have to use a time lapse or skip parts. But yeah, I mean, it's gladiator games to an extent. But that's what the fans want to see, I guess. So that's what they keep doing. I really wanted to do a challenge that kind of got back to the old ways, which is what I talked to Mark Long about in doing the new OG challenge. Get back to the old ways of having them be fun, more fun than kind of intense and based around arguments and fights and stuff.
You mentioned the OG challenge that actually airs on April 1st. Were you contacted to be on it?
Yeah, I was contacted to be on it, and I can do it right now. Like I mentioned, after Rivals, I started working for an entertainment marketing firm, and I was there for 5 years, we were going like gangbusters. It was amazing. It was it was an awesome experience, but there was no time for a challenge. And there was a small gap in between where they contacted me before I started working for Puff, and I said I could do one, but I didn't get on it. And that was the first time I had not been, they'd asked me, and they said, do you want to do it? And I said yes, and then I hadn't been on it. So I was a little bit weirded out, not weirded out, but I was confused by that. But, they have their own agenda, their own strategy for casting the show. And then Mark contacted me about OGs about a year and a half, more, actually way before the pandemic. We had talked about it, and then during the pandemic, he was like, I want to get this going. I was like, sure, I've got all these projects that I'm working on, but I'm down to help. Like, how can I help? So I felt like I was in on the ground floor. And then when it all rolled out, they called me and said, are you available? I said, yeah. And they didn't pick me. And I was a little bit confused and a little bit frustrated because when I saw the cast, I was like, wait a minute, something's not right here. But because those are all my boys. Like Cyrus is on there, I've known Cyrus forever. Ace is on there from my cast.
Ace, yep.
So look, it looks like a fun cast, very dynamic. I'm sure it's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to checking it out, especially because of the cast. I haven't really followed up with a lot of the newer shows because I feel like there's a pocket of time where you can watch your section of the shows and follow the people, but then there's just too many personalities and too many people to keep up with, and you just kind of follow your core group. But this one looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And as much as I am kind of put off by what happened for those of you who don't know, I've had a number of different experiences on a number of different shows, and some have been good and some have been bad. But overall, I'd say they were good. And I'm definitely interested in doing another one. I just can't let it, if I'm busy with doing something, I can't just full-heartedly jump into a challenge if it would detract from what I'm trying to do professionally. So the timing has to be right. And this timing actually did time out right this time, but they didn't pick me. So I have my own theories as to why that was, but
let's kind of bring it back a ways, taking you back to kind of like how this started, because I want to kind of get more into like your casting story, so to speak, and kind of like the long form story of how it went down.
Oh yeah, mine. You got to remember this was a while. This was 20 years ago. They were casting for Making the Band 2. I find it's very coincidental that I ended up working for Diddy, after the fact that I auditioned for Making the Band 2. But I was always rapping in my free time, goofing around, rapping, freestyling, and so I was working on a movie for Fox, and my friend called me and said, "Hey, they're auditioning for Making the Band 2 at the Highlands, which is in LA, off of Hollywood Boulevard. You should stop in and just audition." And I looked at the timetable and I talked to my production coordinator and said, "Can I take this break?" And she let me. And I was early there. I got there like 30 minutes early, so I was one of the first in there. And I was wearing an all purple velour jumpsuit. I had on big puffy white and sneakers. I had like big hair. My hair doesn't afro, but it's just like puffy. Like people remember it. It was just all puffed out. And I rapped Eminem. So they only had like 5 different songs that you could rap. I picked Eminem, and I was terrible. I mean, Mike, god awful. It was crap. I was missing lines. I was off beat. My voice sounded terrible. So at the end, I looked up. I didn't even want to hear what they had to say. I dropped the microphone and just walked off stage. I just left. I walked out. The Highlands is on the 3rd floor of the complex. I got down. I was on foot walking down the stairs. I got down to the 1st floor, and I heard, "Adam, Adam, Adam, Adam. Wait. And it was a PA, a production assistant. Chased me down the stairs and said, "They want to talk to you." And I said, "Nope, I'm not going to be on one of those blooper shows, like, where, hey, how bad it was." Those like idol blooper shows where they show the worst people. I was like, "I'm not going to be on a blooper show." They said, No. Another casting director wants to talk to you. It's like, okay. So I went back upstairs, and they handed me a packet, like an inch thick, and it was one of those personality kind of tests. And like, these people are really interested in you, but they would like you to fill this out. So I filled out all these questions, like, what is your greatest fear? Like, what do you wish you could do? If you could have one superhero power, what would it be? All that kind of stuff, right? Fill out all these crazy questions. And I go up to a recording area, and there's a man and a woman with a camera, and they just sit down. They're like, "Hey, we're casting for reality show, and he'd just love to ask some questions. And I was like, okay. And I sat down, and it was supposed to be about 15, 20 minutes, and I was up there for about an hour and a half. And I got along with them, they got along with me, and we had a great time. And at the end, I left, I gave them my number, and that was it. I walked out of there. I did not hear back from them for, I think it was 8 or 9 months. So 8 or 9 months later, I'm working on a fashion magazine show for the African American Heritage Network, and the show's about to end, and I get a call from them. It's like, hey, this is Buna Murray. We were the ones that interviewed you 9 months ago. Are you still interested in doing a show? I was like, yeah. They said, it's real world. Come in for an interview. So I thought, okay, this kind of times out well. They're like, we're sending a PA to your house on Saturday afternoon. Just be ready to come in. So I did that. I got in the car, went to the interview, and didn't really know what to expect. And I sat there and I interviewed with them for another hour and a half. And they was like, thanks, that was great. We'll be in touch. And the next call I get is, hey, you're in the finals for either Real World or Road Rules. And we're going to fly in 30 people. And we're going to pick 7 for Real World and 6 for Road Rules. And you're in the finals. I was like, oh, shoot, great. All right. So I held off on interviewing for another job just to wait. They said they would let me know within 2 weeks, and they called me on the way home, and I went nuts. Like, my buddy was in the car with me. I was so excited to go. I'd never watched The Real World, though. That was the thing, right? See, I'd never seen the show because reality TV at the time had the stigma. I worked in what we call real entertainment, right? Like scripted television, scripted film, and the reality genre hadn't blown up the way it has in the past 15 years, where half the programming is non-scripted. So when I finally did watch it, I got to watch the show right before mine was Vegas. And when I watched it, there were 4 hot girls, 3 dudes in a hot tub, making out, having orgies, doing things like that. I was like, whoa! And I was 22 at the time, so I was like, this looks awesome. Like, what? And I didn't have any reservations about, being on camera. I didn't really see it as real television. I worked in a world where the only real celebrity were musicians and actors, real actors. Reality TV people weren't real celebrities. It was something to do for fun, And I signed in. I jumped in with both feet. They flew me to Paris. After the call, I think it was another 2 or 3 weeks before I flew to Paris.
Wow.
That was it. It happened in a whirlwind, and we returned. I remember the show aired the first week of June, and we flew back on May 25th. So we were only back for 10 days or so before the show aired. So I didn't really have much of a reprieve once we got back. It was an intense experience, and then from there, I went from, and I'd always been around celebrity. My father is in the Commodores. For those of you who don't know, it's a R&B group from the 60s and 70s and 80s. Actually, they've been around forever. They still perform to this day. And because of that, I was around it a lot growing up. And when I was in LA, you'd see it all the time, but it was never me. So it's a very different perspective when you're standing next to someone who has celebrity status versus being the person. And what happens is you become very self-conscious initially. I think it was Madonna or somebody famous that said people are worthless for the 12 months after they become famous because your world changes. People treat you differently. When people meet you or hear you or you're exposed to them in any capacity, they think they know you ahead of time, or they have judgments that are pre-existing because of either things that have happened in their life that they attribute to you, or things that you bring about. Like when they see you, they have this visceral reaction. All right, so it's a unique experience, and you have to get used to it. And some people don't adapt well. Some people that I know very personally from the shows haven't adapted well. So it's been a roller coaster ride, and I'm lucky. I think that there have been so many people kind of in my shoes or have experienced the same things that I've experienced. There's kind of a fraternity now, a sorority of people who have experienced it and know of it. And some people use it for the worst at it. Some people just can't handle it, and one of the things that I'm experiencing now is in this culture we live in, people don't care about the truth anymore. They'll just believe anything, and when they're presented with the truth, they don't care. They either stick to their guns or they just say, "Oh, that's the case. They'll move on with no repercussions." People can come out. I mean, I'm in a situation now where with Kellyanne saying years ago that that she was assaulted, and then people find out it's not true, but they don't care, right? They'll say, "Well, that wasn't the case, but it's the case now, moving forward. So even though you didn't do it, other people have, so we'll just move on." Not knowing how detrimental it is when you talk shit about somebody, it can affect their life and their livelihood. I mean, what we do is put out there for the world to see. So there's a certain amount of expectation that your behavior is public domain, right? But that doesn't mean you can just say anything you want to say, right? Like you can't just go out, you can't walk into a crowded theater and yell fire. The First Amendment doesn't protect that because it puts people in harm's way. It's the same thing with this notoriety and this celebrity status. So, when you're someone in a situation that requires you to kind of defend yourself publicly all the time, you can get to a place of frustration where you don't really have a big enough microphone to get through to all the people. You just have to accept the fact that some people just don't care about the truth. Some people are always going to feel the way they're going to feel, and that's it. And that's very frustrating for a normal person to understand, right? Because you think if I showed someone, I said, "Hey, the sky's blue," and I showed it to them, that person would go, "Oh, okay, we're moving along." But that's not how the world works, and that's not how society works. And we're seeing that now with all fake news and all these going on. Our society is so divided because we don't know what to believe anymore. You'll watch something happen the same way that someone else will watch something happen, and you'll both have different perspectives on it. And it's crazy to me, but that's just the world we live in. I think it's criminal. I honestly believe that, I use Kellyanne as an example, but I think what she did was criminal. I think Kellyanne going out publicly saying things that didn't happen, and then just rescinding them and saying, "Oh, well," and then not mentioning it anymore or bypassing it. You shouldn't be able to do that. I think anybody who does something, let's call it sexual assault. Any guy who does something inappropriate or sexually assaults a woman should be in jail, no doubt. But that's criminal activity. But if a woman goes out and says that this guy sexually assaulted me and it didn't happen, she should be in jail. I think there's this huge double standard right now because you look at what's happening with Deshaun Watson and Cuomo and all these people. If there's people assume for millions of years, societies assumed that, women were lying or that women weren't telling the truth. So there was men acted with impunity for millennia, right? So now the pendulum is swinging the other way. And they're like, okay, well now women are having this Me Too movement, this moment of empowerment. Great, let's correct it. And now we're overcorrecting. So now it's like anytime a woman says anything, people are too scared to say, well, wait a minute, let's look at the facts. So I understand it. Look, nobody's going to cry. It's like being a white man, right? Nobody's going to cry about, if a white guy's like, "Oh, reverse racism," nobody gives a shit. Nobody wants to hear you right now because black people and people of color have been oppressed for so long. We're trying to correct this thing. And yes, there's going to be some overcorrection. I feel like the same way with women. It's like, women have been abused for so long and have not been heard, have been muted for so long that there's going to be this overcorrection. And in that gets swept up some collateral damage. So I understand that that's happening, but it doesn't make it any less criminal. I don't think we should treat it like it's any less than that. It affects people any less than just spouting lies and having no basis for lies, because it does affect me. Like I admit, I was hurt when I was shocked when I heard it, but not nearly as shocked, because it's like if someone came out to you, Mike, and was like, "Hey, Mike was born with 6 fingers on his left hand," and then put that out there, you'd be like, "What the heck?" Like that makes no sense. And you'd laugh at it, which is what I did when I hear crazy stuff. Oh yeah, okay, that's crazy. But then if you don't react to it and you assume that people aren't going to believe it, and they do, then you have to say, well, wait a minute. Let's correct this. And when you find out that people don't care about the correction at all, that's when the frustration sets in. So I'm vamping a little bit just because this has been on my mind. But
no, yeah, I was actually
they put Kellyanne back on the show. I was like, wait a minute. I was thinking maybe they put her back on and didn't put me back on because of that. Even though everybody knows that didn't happen, if you say it, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm over it for now, for this moment, in this second. But as we move forward through this whole process, I think it's important to take everything into perspective and say, okay, yes, I understand that there's a lot going on out there that we don't know about, but let's reserve judgment until we have the facts, because I personally have all the facts, and I choose not to disparage people in the public eye, to come out just for the sake of a little bit of notoriety. I could get some attention. Dude, I could write a book. I could go on a podcast and tell all the dirty secrets, but I don't, because I don't want to disparage people. And it's, there's no reason to do that for some minimal gain on my part to destroy another person, especially, more importantly, if it's not true. Right. So
Right.
That has been on my mind, and there's a certain amount of power you have, and I've said this for many years, ever since the Spider-Man came out with it. With great power comes great responsibility, and once you have a platform and you have a place to speak on it, and you have this now with your podcast, with what you're doing on YouTube and through all of your different media forms, you have a responsibility to kind of tell the truth, and hopefully it will start to filter back down again. It'll start to filter back down, because all we are is our reputation, unfortunately, in this life right now. That's all we are, because once you lose your reputation, it's like, well, we have too much other stuff to listen to. We have too many other people that are screaming out there, for us to listen to. So once we don't want to pay attention to one guy, another guy's right there to fill the spot. And I get that, but I also know that the smart people, the ones that really get it, those are the ones that I surround myself with, that I surround myself with now. And for too long, I think when you're in the entertainment industry and you get sucked into certain different vortexes, you surround yourself with people that kind of just either a yes man, or tell you what you want to hear, or do things around you because it helps them. And when you finally get to a healthy place where you're surrounded by people that you care about and they care about you, you start to see the light. And I think that's what 2020, going back to 2020, did for me, is that I got to that place where it's like, okay, what do you really want to do, kid? Right? I mean, and you got to do it creatively, and you got to do it from the goodness of your own heart.
Yeah, no, I actually wasn't gonna. I had a few subscribers actually wanted me to talk about what you were just talking about. I wasn't actually gonna bring it up, but since you brought it up, I was gonna just kind of ask you to like gloss over like that situation, I guess you could say, and kind of like I don't know, maybe clear the name of yourself, or like what actually the situation was.
Yeah. I don't want to get too bogged down with the details. I know everybody wants to hear them, but again, they would make Kellyanne look very bad. So I'm not going to go into it like that. But she has whatever she has going on in her own head, and I want to speak to that. But nothing. I did nothing that would warrant any type of. I didn't do anything what we would call wrong, right? So there was no sexual assault. There was no coercion. There was nothing like that, And we're in a time right now where people are hypersensitive to that, with Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein, and now obviously I feel like every other day there are new charges against a new celebrity for some kind of sexual misconduct, right? And again, I was shocked when I heard it, because anybody who was there knows that this didn't happen. And so here's a woman who, 10 years post facto, comes out and is like, all these women are coming out and criminally says things about me that are not true, because she knows she's not going to get any flack for it. She knows that everyone's going to support her. And everyone's going to say, oh, we're so sorry this happened to you. She wasn't relevant at the time. People are going to rally around her, just like they're rallying around all the other women who were courageous enough to come forward. And there's such a strong contrast between being courageous enough to come forward with something and being cowardly enough to falsely accuse somebody. And that's why I say it's criminal, because, as courageous as the women are who legitimately have complaints, there's just as much cowardice associated with women who are just doing it for attention, and destroying other men's lives or women's lives, whoever they're accusing, just so they can get a little bit of attention. And I get it. Like, it's really difficult for women now in the public eye who might be aging out of a certain demographic, right? Everyone goes through it. I feel it's particularly difficult for people in reality TV as they watch the younger generations and younger women, younger cast members coming in, kind of taking their place. So I get the attraction to saying things just to get attention. But I have all the details of what transpired, and none of what she says is with regard to any activity that someone would consider to be inappropriate is accurate in any way, shape, or form. Even my friends laugh at it like, this is crazy that she's talking. Not laugh at it like it's like sexual misconduct. It's funny laughing at it because they know it didn't happen, and what actually did happen is an interesting story. But I'm not going to put somebody else's business out there like that. So I think it's just a shame because the people that look, I've explained it to people, and even when they know I'm innocent or didn't do anything wrong, will still say like, we don't care. Like, we're still in the business of finding people that are guilty and going after them. So there are people out there that are gonna hate me no matter what I say, and don't care that I'm innocent. And that's just the case. I mean, if you're one of those people that doesn't really take into account rational behavior or rational thought or a pragmatic way of approaching a situation, then I don't really care what you think, because nothing I did is gonna move the needle anyway. There are some people that are out there just for blood, and they don't care who they hurt and how many innocent people get swept up in the net.
No, I'm definitely glad that you shared, because I think that it's important in just social or society in general. I feel like there's always a misconception, and people typically, when they hear one thing, never take the chance to hear the other. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of talk about that and kind of clear the situation a little bit and hear your perspective, because I feel like for the past couple of years, that's not been prominent, but it's been kind of like an Easter egg amongst the challenge fandom, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so. and I never said anything because I didn't want to lend a microphone to it, right? Like, I'm like, this is crazy. Like I said, it's like if somebody came out and said, oh, you were born with extra appendages, you'd say that's a crazy rumor, and that's how foreign a concept it was to me. But given the social climate right now, right, with sexual assault being such a huge issue, obviously that brought it to the forefront more so than I think it would have been in the past. And look, like I said, anybody guilty of this behavior, I'm all for it. I've always been a proponent of women's rights. I have a very strong mother that I was raised with. My father wasn't around as much as most fathers because he was on tour when I was young, and so my mother did a lot of the fatherly things when I was growing up, and I've always been around a strong female figure in my life, and I take it very, very seriously. So yeah, it hurt me, that in particular. You could accuse me of anything else I wouldn't be bothered with, but that in particular is significant for me because of how I was raised and because of all the important, prominent female women in my life, and how I view myself. I take pride in my ability to curate healthy relationships with women.
Mm. But we could leave that topic and put that kind of to bed now and kind of transition into some challenge stuff, maybe lighter topics. I want to ask you, though, kind of, because do you ever think about time to time about had Big Easy not gone down in that final, you potentially, would have been a challenge champion had it not happened? Do you think about that from time to time, or is that kind of something that you're just whatever about?
Yeah, the two I think about it is, botching the final with CT and Rivals, which was my fault, and then with Big Easy, because we really didn't need to drag him and force him like we did. In our minds, we wanted to be ahead at every stage. And I think a lot of athletes in the traditional sports feel this way, right? If you're a favorite, look at March Madness right now. When you're a favorite and you're a team that is supposed to win by a large margin, which we were in the finals of Gauntlet 3. I mean, we had all our strong guys left. We had basically culled the herd, so we had only strong players in the end. And we had dominated from beginning to end of that challenge. We were supposed to win by a large margin. And when we started to fall behind, we went into panic mode. And we're like, come on, it's Eric dragging us back. Come on, Eric, and tried to drag him along instead of just accepting the fact, look, at some point, we're going to blow past them. Yeah, we'll just do what we do, and we're going to, because this whole thing can't be just a marathon. They're not just going to have us run in circles for 8 hours, right? We're going to get to a point where we need to lift something or move something, and then we'll just blow right past them because we have 6 guys left and they only have 2. So rather than have that come into our heads, we dragged him along and it caused the situation which ended up, he passed out. For those of you who don't know, he passed out from heat exhaustion, and they disqualified us because we had to have all our guys cross the finish line. So I liken it to a team in the tournament who is behind late and they panic instead of saying, "Look, we're the better team. We're down 6 or 8 or 10 points. Don't worry about it. Stick to the game plan, and we'll win this game." And they panic, and then the underdog 15 seed or 14 seed wins the game because they panicked. But hindsight's 2020. Of course, if I had it to do all over again, I'd say, "Hey guys, the tail end of this is going to be a 2-hour dig. So let's just wait till the 2-hour dig and not worry about this 5-minute or 10-minute gap right now. We'll blow by them." Wish I had the foresight to do that. But the truth is, there was no way to know that, and I don't regret it. I don't lose sleep over it because that decision makes sense to me. It made sense in the time that I did it. I made that decision. It was the wrong one, but I'm not going to make the right decision every time, and neither are my teammates. And so, something like that, I don't lose sleep over it. I wish we won. Sure, why not? Why not collect the money and have the title and all of that? But truth be told, that's something that I just chalk it up to the competition gods, the challenge gods. We lost that one. I don't lose sleep over it. Move on. I do lose sleep over the end of Rivals because that was a mental mistake I made. For those of you who don't know, at the end of Rivals, I picked up the wrong ball and went in the wrong direction. We were also favored to win that one. I mean, me and CT were the strongest team by far, in my opinion. And we should have won that one. And me grabbing the wrong ball, going the wrong direction. And there were rumors that I had thrown that challenge. Nothing could be further from the truth. I wanted to win. Sure, I'm friends with all these guys outside of the challenge. And that's the thing. Like, I have relationships outside of that challenge, especially because I work in entertainment. I think I probably had more relationships outside that challenge than most people that were doing them. But in that moment, I wanted to win. In any challenge, I want to win. Not just for the money. I want to win because in the spirit of competition, I like to win. I'm a competitor. I played sports my whole life. So there's no part of me that ever had quit in it. And that's the reason the end of Rivals really, really gets me. A, because I think we would have won the whole thing. But B, because I really think that it was my fault we lost. Sure, I mean, leading up to that, there were some things that happened that could have kept us out of that elimination round. But really, the elimination round in Rivals was it's probably the low point in of competition for me, which is why I want to get back on so bad. That was the end, and then I started the second part of my entertainment career, and I spent 5 years at my entertainment company and then the other 2 years working for Puff and all of that. So I didn't have time to go back for a challenge, which is why I'm a little jealous now, because now that I am able to go back and I do have, I can leave for a month right now and go and do it. And I was like, Mark, let me do the OGs, and I got passed up on that. That's very frustrating.
No, yeah, this is the section that I'm actually, since we're talking about all this stuff, it's kind of like my favorite section, because my favorite part of kind of talking about the challenge is talking about the what ifs or the hypotheticals or the theories and whatnot. And that actually has come up a lot as well with this whole CT elimination with you guys at the end of Rivals. Subscribers wanted me to ask if there was any potential deal in place of you throwing in whatnot. So none of that, no?
No, I'm not going to say deals aren't made, right? I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say deals are made, but I'm not going to say they're not made, all right? What I will say is that I've never cut a deal. Not once. I've done 6 challenges, and not once have I ever cut a deal that would affect the outcome of any challenge. I never cut a deal where that would affect, like, hey, I mean, there was a time where Frank and I were on opposite teams, and with Frank, I was like, all right, I'll if you keep me out of the elimination round, I'll throw this challenge. But really, when the challenge day came, Frank tried his best and I tried my best, but really there was no adhesion to it, right? So the interest was there because it was the final challenge, and we both wanted to get to the final and to have a shot at the money. So we danced around the idea, but nothing ever came to fruition. And there was never, and certainly nothing to ever get me eliminated, right? So if I'm going to throw that challenge, if I'm going to throw a challenge to do something, it's to keep me there, right? It's never so that I would be eliminated. So if anything, I would have brokered a deal where the other team would throw it, so they would get eliminated, and I would share the money with them. But I'm never going to trust somebody else to win the money and then share it with me. That's not going to happen. But if somebody wants to cut a deal and keep me there, and then afterwards I have to cut them a check. I'll entertain the idea, but I would, and again, it's against rules, by the way. That's against the challenge rules anyway. So none of that could ever be known publicly,
So, I want to hear your thoughts on this, though, because this is one theory that actually would be working against you guys that a lot of fans have kind of speculated on, which was the final daily challenge that got you guys thrown into that elimination when you guys had to, it was the helicopter when you had to climb up the ladder. I don't know if you noticed this, but your guys' ladder was the only one that was kind of dragging across the water. And a lot of fans like to play devil's advocate here and speculate that that was kind of like intentional because they wanted to see you and CT, intentional on production's end, because they wanted to see you and CT in that final elimination because, I don't know, maybe for enticement or they thought it would get viewership. I don't know. That's what people like to speculate. They maybe wanted that elimination to be must see, so that's why your guys' ladder kind of like hung low a little bit in the water. Do you feel like there's more to that?
All right. So listen carefully to everything I'm about to say because I don't want to be misrepresented. I don't want anyone else to walk away with a false sense of what happened. Everything you said is true. Okay. Now I can't speculate as to the motives for production. CT's ladder did drag in the water, where everyone else's didn't. CT would have easily climbed that rope and pulled that chain, and everything would have been different had his ladder not dragged in the water. That is all very true. Now, whether production did it on purpose, I don't know, and whether or not his time would have been better than Leroy's, I don't know. Right? We don't know any of those facts because they didn't happen. What I will say in defense of production is they've always been fair to me as a competitor in all of my challenges. They've always tried to do what I consider to be the right thing because everyone wants to win and everybody's lobbying for their own self-interest. And I feel like they've done as good a job as possible of staying neutral. In that case, I think it was the helicopter. There's so many variables associated with that challenge, right? There's a guy flying a helicopter. Yes, he's a professional helicopter pilot, but we're talking about a couple of feet in height, right? In altitude. So CT and I went first. That was one of the disadvantages of being the on the outskirts of everything all the time was we always had to go first. If anyone remembers, the female winners got to just decide the order of the men, and because all the females were on the against us, me and CT were not necessarily against us, but they were pro Kenny and pro Johnny and whatnot. We had to go first. So I think the helicopter pilot botched our flight and then got it right the rest of the way through. We were the test flight. We were the practice round. And once they saw what happened, then he did the others differently. And that's just a byproduct. That's just one of the things that happens in production. It's an imperfect thing, and we got screwed. We got screwed on that end. So I do agree. Look, that was unfair. We unfairly got thrown into that. But again, I don't know what CT's time would have been climbing that rope. Leroy got up there real fast, like real fast. And so, that's all I can say about that. I'm frustrated by I can't blame her. I can't get mad. I very rarely just bark about Peanut Murray. They do a pretty decent job of things. And when I do have a problem with them, I'll let people know about it. I've been around. No, I mean, look, I've been around different directors, different producers, different teams, cameramen, sound guy, the whole thing. I've done 6 of them in different countries. The only people that have done more than me are like Derek and Johnny. I mean, they practically live on that show. But I feel like they do as good a job as they can, and they're pretty fair, which is why it's so frustrating now. Kind of looking at it like, okay, as we move forward, like how does that impact kind of my relationship with them moving forward? I don't want to do challenges forever, I don't think, but they're fun, man. I know I'm older now, but damn, man, I still think they feel like summer camp. When you go on those challenges and you get there, those first day when you walk in that house and you're like, it's all brand new and the fridge is stocked and you're just running around looking at stuff. I don't care how old you are, man. That shit is fun. That is a fun day right there. So even the competition is fun. I mean, for any athlete. For anybody who is competitive in any way, those butterflies you get right before a game, like pumping yourself up and all of that. If you're not competing in high school or college anymore, it's tough to get those, right? Like, I play pickup basketball, or I'm in an adult baseball league now, and I love to compete, but there's nothing like that camera being on you, and there being hundreds of thousands of dollars in a pot that you're going for. I mean, the amount of the energy level, the adrenaline that you get that's pumping through your veins because of that is unparalleled. I mean, it's why think about why Brett Favre kept coming back after he retired. Well, these guys, I mean, if you're an athlete and you're in a stadium and there's 70,000 people screaming your name, there's nothing like that. So I think there's a level of addiction, of adrenaline addiction, that's associated with that experience for sure.
No, yeah, for sure. And I mean, since we're on the whole topic of Rivals 1, we've gotten this far without kind of talking about it. And before I dive into it, I just want to preface and say everything we're about to talk about in no way, shape, or form is any direct reflection of who CT is now. I just want to say that I'm very proud and admire the way he's grown over the past couple of years with being a father and stuff. And he's definitely shown tremendous amount of growth on our TV screens now. But just bringing it back a ways to a little back in time. And I know most fans can point at the Duel 2 fight as kind of the big moment, obviously, because it was. But, I mean, if you really look at it, you guys kind of were going at each other a little bit since your Real World Paris. I mean, you had a Gauntlet 3 incident when he kind of poured the bottle on your head. And then Duel 2 is finally the blow up. So taking it back a ways, kind of to when you and CT were first met in Real World Paris, kind of how that bad blood, I guess you could say, kind of stemmed and started. Why do you feel like there was a disconnect?
I think CT comes off pretty well on camera, but when we were together in Paris, I think we just rubbed each other the wrong way because of I guess the way when you're around somebody all the time, it's different than just seeing snippets of them, right? There are things that weigh on you day in and day out that you don't experience through the screen. And I think that's just what happened in Paris. We would go out and he would get in altercations all the time. He was very abrasive, and Ace and I would like to go out and just have fun. And more often than not, when we would go out with him, the night would end in a fight or some altercation or us getting thrown out of a club. And so that got frustrating. And after a while, it was like, man, I got your back. You're in my house. We're supposed to be roommates, but you're really detracting from my ability to enjoy this experience because every time we go out, I'm worried that we're going to be in some kind of fight. So that turned into him thinking that I don't have his back, right? Oh, you're not my brother. You're not my roommate. You're not that close to me because it should be unconditional love. So that's the way he viewed it. And I viewed it as, well, if it's unconditional love, you got to have my back and appreciate my perspective and know that I don't want to go out and get in fights every night. So I think that was what happened. And the fight in Paris, so in Paris, we were at a bar. He starts talking mess to some guy. He and the guy get into it. He punches the guy a couple of times. Me and Ace help break the fight up, and he's mad at me for not jumping in and trying to punch this guy or try to defend him in the fight. He was never in any danger. These guys didn't really want to fight back. The guy took 2 punches and didn't even punch back. But through his mind, and in his mind, at least this is what I'm assuming. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he saw that as me not defending him, me not having his back. So that was the beginning of the rift, right? And then as we move forward, it became this thing where neither one of us wanted to have a major presence in the other's life, but we were forced to be together because of the show. So when you do the show, unfortunately, and I don't think people understand this enough, you are inexorably linked to people that you've been on shows with that are in your cast forever. Which is why earlier when I was saying it's so detrimental to a lot of people when you say things, when you make disparaging comments or you say things that aren't true, because you can't take those things back. So when you have an experience with someone on camera, you can't take those things back. Those live out there forever. And because of that, I think that the animosity only grew because we couldn't get away from each other. As much as we wanted to kind of separate, we were always linked by those experiences on screen. And every time we went into people, it's like, hey, how's CT doing? Or hey, how's Adam doing? And then when we finally did see each other again, on Gauntlet 3, we kept it together. We were fine. But because we had the competition buffering everything. In the end, I was trying to keep him out of another fight. He was one of our stronger players. He was about to punch Frank and get kicked off the show. So I broke that fight up, and then he turned on me. And that's when I realized this guy, you're done with him. He poured a beer on my head on television, which is very emasculating. And very, it's one of those things where, of course, I can lash out and try to man up and punch him and save face. But then I get kicked off the show. So there's really no viable recourse for me at that point. And having to watch that later, I was embarrassed. And that's one of the reasons that the Duel 2 fight happened, was because the last time we were together on the Gauntlet 3, he poured a beer on my head, and I was just over it, I was willing to just kind of put things aside, but then, unfortunately, some alcohol got involved on both sides. It was a long night of partying, and the night before, he had pushed Isaac around. He had thrown Isaac around. The cameras didn't capture it, but he was bullying Isaac, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, this guy can't be a bully on the show, and I felt kind of responsible because he was my cast member. And I felt like no one was going to stick up for themselves and no one was going to step up to him. But because I knew him better than anybody on that cast, I was in a unique position to say or do something to stop this behavior. And it escalated unnecessarily. I take full responsibility for it. And the rest is caught on camera, which they did a really great job of footage, because that was our day off, and they only had one camera guy there. So I'm impressed they got as much footage as they did with one camera. They usually have 2 or 3 or 4 circulating to capture, every angle. But they did a really good job with the one lone camera that they had going. But yeah, man, I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack there. So it's tough to kind of, I know that is kind of the long version to most people, but there's a much longer version, and I'm sure CT has his version of it. I can say that I hope he's in a great place right now. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but it seems like he's doing great. He's still doing challenges and winning them, and it seems like he's grown as a person. But I think when we are alone together for extended periods of time, there's just some kind of inherent personality difference between us that gets brought up, and we can, like I said, in doses we can be. I can appreciate him as a man. I hope he can appreciate me as a man in the years that we've known each other. And I just think that, but maybe now it's different. Maybe now that we're both like older. I mean, we're both in different places in our lives. Like you said, he's married. I don't know if he's still with his wife or not, but he has a kid. I'm sure he's in a different place. I'm sure fatherhood has changed him dramatically. So. He's not the hothead he once was. I'm certainly not as emotional as I used to be. So, it would be nice to kind of catch up with him and kind of just hash it out again and just hug each other out.
No, yeah, no doubt. What was the dynamic though heading into Rivals 1? Do you feel like, because obviously the aftermath of that whole fight, like how do you feel like you guys, were there any maybe conversations had heading into Rivals 1 post Duel 2 fight?
No.
Really?
I didn't see CT until the bus. So we flew separately. They flew us out separately to Costa Rica. I flew into Miami, met up with a bunch of cast members there, which they always do, because you meet up at the airport. So if you don't know who's going to be on the cast, usually you send around text messages and social media, whatever, and you find out who's going to be on the cast ahead of time, at least most of it. And then you really know because it's solidified once you get to the airport. And you see people in the terminal about to hop on the same flight you're getting on. But CT wasn't on that flight from Miami to Costa Rica. So I had heard rumors about the theme of the show and that he was going to be there, but nothing that was validated. And then I got there, and I got on the bus, and he still wasn't there. And I sat on the bus for about 20 minutes, and sure enough, he gets on the bus. And I'm like, oh, shit. And I was like near the back of the bus, and he didn't even say hi to me. He got on and came down to the middle portion of the bus and just sat down. And then we had about an hour and a half drive to the house, or to a place where we ate, and we got off the bus, and that was the first time I said, what's up? I was like, what's up? And it wasn't like, hey, man, sorry about the fight, or it was just more like, hey, how you been? What's going on? Almost like sweeping it under the rug. Because we had, if you remember, met up on the reunion show. So we did have a couple of hours there in Los Angeles at the reunion show to get it off our chest. And then after the reunion show, we spoke again on the phone. We actually made plans to meet up off camera. We didn't meet up, but we felt we were in a good place. So then we didn't talk until Rivals. So again, I think it was because we both knew that while we were in a good place, we didn't want to just force it. I don't want to just pretend like it's all gravy. And that's what kind of frustrated me about people saying, well, why wouldn't you just say you were friends on Rivals? Why wouldn't you just be his friend? And it's like, I didn't want to be fake. I didn't want to go on there and say, Chris and I are best friends now. We are, like peanut butter and jelly and whatever other phrase you want to use. And then have to watch that later and have misrepresented myself and lied and said, like, hey, we're the best of friends, when in fact we're not, because I knew after that show we would probably go our separate ways and not start a business together or live in the same city or do any of the other stuff that everyone pretends they're going to do when they're at summer camp, So that's why I did that. I think I could have been a little less cold. I could have warmed to him more on Rivals for sure as I watch it. But in the moment, as I remember being there in the moment, I didn't want to misrepresent myself, and that's why I was kind of cold to him as his partner. But from a competition standpoint, I gave it my all, which is why it's so frustrating that we didn't come out with the W.
Did you feel like he was genuinely trying to make amends and be your friend, or did you feel like he was doing that for the sake of partnership, or do you feel like he genuinely wanted a friendship with you?
It's a great question, because the short answer is I don't know, but it felt as though he was in a situation where he was the bad guy on that show. People there didn't really like him. Both men and women had kind of their own separate aversions to him. So he was looking to kind of team up with me, and it would just be me and him, and we'd just ride or die, circle the wagons, screw everybody else until the end, which I understand because of what he was dealing with. But I was friends with everybody out there, with the exception of a couple of people I didn't know that well. I was friendly with them. I mean, they stay at my house when they come to LA. They call me and send me a video of themselves. So I had actual genuine friendships with these people. So I wasn't in the same situation where I would just be like, hey, screw you guys, we're going to nail you to the wall. I was of this mindset like, look, let's compete. Me and CT are the best team here. Let's compete. And if you guys can beat us, great. If you can't, I'm shipping you home. And that's how I took it. I didn't want to degrade CT, or I didn't want to play up my relationship with these guys. I just wanted to enjoy my experience there, which truthfully I did. I had a great time in Costa Rica, and when we went down to Buenos Aires, I genuinely had a good time. I still think it was if you just talk about the experience itself, it was one of the better challenges most fun I've had on challenges. But also just in terms of my own personal mindset, where I was just at peace with what was happening, who I was. I wasn't ransacked with this idea that the whole world's going to come crashing down if I don't win this challenge, or if somebody says the wrong thing, it's going to ruin my life. So, which are normal thoughts for a lot of people on these shows. You have all these ideas about what this is going to maintain. You still do them, right? You still go on the show,
yeah.
But there's a lot of angst associated with the process. But I guess the way to describe my relationship going into that was just kind of denial until we got to a place where we felt comfortable around each other. And I feel comfortable around him now. I do. I just don't want to pretend that it's something that it wasn't. That's all I'm trying to do.
Right, yeah, and a few subscriber questions now, since they wanted to know, since we're talking about obviously real world Paris, you mentioned Ace before. They wanted to know what do you have any relationship with Ace at the moment?
Yeah, Ace is my boy, but we have the kind of relationship where we're really close, right? Like he's like really close with my mom even, and so I don't have to talk to Ace every day or every month even for us to care about each other. I feel like if there's anything I need, he's a guy I can reach out to, and vice versa. And it's genuine love there. We have genuine love for each other. So it's more than just this cursory, oh yeah, we're friends, let's take a selfie together and show it to the world, and you know, like the superficial type of relationship that a lot of people have nowadays, or just want to be friends with somebody for the sake of having friends. And I feel grateful that I have a number of people from the shows in my life like that. Another one is Frank Rossler from
Oh wow.
Vegas. Frank and I are very close, and like he's a guy that I love hanging out with. Like I want to be around. Like if we're in a room and there's 100 people in that room and Frank's at a table, like I'm gonna go sit next to Frank and we're gonna chop it up and we're gonna have a good time. Like he's the kind of guy that I would genuinely be friends with, even if he wasn't on the show. And I think that's the secret to all of it. Anybody struggling with that who's on reality TV, I think if you could just find somebody who you would have been friends with, were they on the show or not, you'll be okay. Because those are the ones that you can really, those are the relationships you can really hang your hat on later. And Ace hasn't done a challenge in a long time, and he's on the new one, so I'm excited to see how he comes off. And he's a fun guy. Like if you follow him on social media, you'll see that he does all these goofy stuff. He builds like bridges in random parts of Georgia, and he's always shooting stuff with his drone. And, he's an interesting guy to say the least. So I'm grateful that I have that relationship with him because we really just got to get along. We've always gotten along from day one to this day. I can count on one hand the number of times we've disagreed on stuff.
Yeah, and another guy that people wanted to know about your relationship with was actually, obviously this would take it back a ways, was obviously Landon. And before you go, I just want to put into perspective, because I actually had Landon on my show in early September, and that was actually the first time that he's like visually talked on a screen about the show in 10 years, right? So it was kind of a big deal. And he kind of set the internet ablaze a little bit with in regards to his kind of perspectives on CT, because he had some pretty high praise for you. And obviously you got to remember, through Landon's perspective, he's kind of someone who's got kind of shut out from the challenge world, so he doesn't really know or been familiar with what's gone on in probably about 10 years. So his last recollection of CT is obviously going to be a little skewed, because all he would probably remember would be that fight. So he had some pretty choice words back then. It kind of set the internet ablaze. But people wanted to know what your relationship with Landon was like.
Oh, I mean, I love it. See, Landon and I think the best way I can describe it is mutual respect, right? I appreciate intellect. I always have. And Landon is one of those people who I think was just gifted, physically gifted. He's a very patient and caring person. I think he has a high emotional, he's an intellectual guy as well. However, I think emotionally, his emotional quotient is through the roof. He feels things for people. He cares deeply about things. And I still think he's one of the greatest athletes that the show's ever seen. In terms of size, speed, strength, at his peak, he was pretty much unstoppable in my book. But what comes to mind in terms of Landon is just that, I don't know how healthy a show like this would be for somebody like that who feels. Right? You have to be a little bit numb to things. You have to be able to, because you're going to get so much vitriol from people who don't understand, who weren't there. And I feel like Landon understands that. He is a very caring person who gets, he's an optimist. He wants the world to be a certain way, and he hopefully surrounds himself with good people. I mean, you want to talk about a quality individual, somebody that I would bring into my life, no questions asked. That's Landon. If Landon were dating my daughter, I'd be like, great, awesome. So I understand how he could have a negative view of CT. Look, I do as well. My thing is, I have a hard time disparaging anybody, talking shit, saying anything negative about somebody, because I know that, like I said before, we're all the hero in our own story, right? We are all see things through our own eyes, and I try to be empathetic to people who I see as other people, who other people would see as evil, because we love to have that, right? We love to sit here and say, I'm the good guy; these other people are evil. And if we really look at it through their eyes, we would often do exactly what they did or operate in the same way they did if we put ourselves in their shoes. So I have a hard time saying negative things about anybody unless I truly believe they came from a place, like an awful, awful place, and they have intentional intentionally harming somebody, which, to an extent, I think CT was in that headspace. I think he was, blinded by things and just was lashing out. I don't think he was an evil person. I don't think he was doing anything to intentionally be evil, but I think his mindset, the way he looked at things, was skewed incorrectly and was negatively impacting the people around him. Negatively impacted me. That it's like, I think everybody has been around people that are just kind of toxic in that period of their life, and I think there's a period of CT's life where he was just toxic, where he was just negative. He would be having a conversation, and he would bring the conversation down, or he would behave in a way that would just demean somebody or make people feel uncomfortable, and he would do it quite often. So to that end, I think he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and obviously one of those people was Landon. But I can't speak to specifics about, because I'm sure CT and Landon had interactions that I wasn't there for. But my personal relationship with Landon, and again, I haven't seen Landon in 10 years, to be honest with you, or however long it's been. It's been years. I don't know how many years. But Landon was like one of those salt of the earth guys, as far as I knew, and genuine, not just for camera, not just for just like, hey, I'm doing this for camera, I want to look good, because there are those people who are like, I want to show my best face to camera, and then behind the scenes they're a scumbag. You really got a sense that Landon was doing it for all the right reasons. And if I feel like he should have stuck around longer and done more, because he'd always be a value add morally, right? Because I feel like a lot of stuff that happens on these shows, the people screwing each other over and backstabbing and all that behavior, it leaves a lot of these cast members morally bankrupt, bro. It really does. Like Landon can infuse some equity back into that part of the show.
I think it was, and I always bring up this point as well. I brought up to him in particular. It's kind of crazy now seeing with both, obviously, Landon's impact that he made. He did 4 shows and he won 3 out of the 4, and the one that he didn't win was his best year that season performing wise, was Duel 2. He lost the final elimination.
That's the elimination where they were injured. I mean,
Mm-hmm. The fascinating point that I want to bring up, and I brought this up to him as well, is that in between that period of time, he had his run, obviously, and then that was kind of like the beginning of Johnny's run and evolution. And between those time periods, like obviously Johnny won the Island, Landon does Duel 2, Johnny wins the Ruins, and then Landon wins Fresh Me Too right after, and then never comes back again. In between those 4-season stretch, they never crossed paths and did a show with each other. So that's what's kind of fascinating to me, is that those two guys, which are pretty much seen as like either, I mean, obviously CT's in the mix as well, but consensus-wise, Johnny, CT, and Landon are pretty much what most would consider the top 3 figures in the history of the show. And it's kind of crazy that 2 out of those 3 have never crossed paths. So
Yeah, I think when I spoke earlier about the casting process, look, they have their own recipe, right? Butte and Murray, they do what they do. They've been doing it for 25 years or however long it's been, and they have a winning recipe, so you can't fault them for it. It is interesting to kind of watch and see how those pieces kind of come together. And even when we talk about regular sports, right? You talk about the end of one era, beginning of another. Like, was it the end of the Tom Brady era, the beginning of the Patrick Mahomes era, and then they ended up crossing paths, and how that would have worked, and so I feel like they call it the 5th sport for a reason, and you can analyze it any way you want, but I honestly believe that as good as Johnny is and was, whatever, physically, he was never the specimen that Landon and CT were in terms of just speed, size, and strength ratios. There just wasn't. I mean, those guys could do it all. But Johnny was a better competitor. Like the way he did the Island screwed people. He's a game player. So that was part of his strength. I mean, he was like an avatar on a video game. You have like size, speed, strength, gamesmanship. He'd be a 10 in the gamesmanship category. So it's part of it.
But thanks again for hopping on here today. I had a pleasure chatting with you, and I feel like we knocked out a bunch of points that maybe people had questions or concerns about over the years. And, I had a fun time chatting with you, man. I've been wanting to do this for quite some time. I'm glad we were able to do it.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me on, and hopefully we'll get to do this again in the future. Like I said, I've got a bunch of projects coming up, stuff that hopefully we can get involved with. I can get you involved with. It'll be an interesting 2021. So thanks for having me on, man, and I look forward to great things in the future.
All right, man. I'll link you this one when it's up.